Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming out. It is really amazing to see this room full again. It's probably the first time it's been this full since before everything changed. And so this room is kind of the way it looked in 1932. So it's really nice to see that again. I'm John Reed. Oops, that's very hot. I'm John Reed, director of the MFA in Creative Writing program here at the New School. There are so many people to thank. I'm just going to thank a few. Thank you to Jenny Tibbetts, Timmy Lewis, Kate Tooley, Lori Lynn Turner, Sabir Sultan, Bianca Lamini, Clarice Rosa Sharif, and just a general thanks to PEN America and the New School. Way too many wonderful people to thank. PEN America and the New School have a long-standing relationship. We've collaborated on symposiums and festivals and issues at hand since, quite likely, before the memory of anyone here. In digging through the archives this afternoon, I stumbled on an event from 1986. Adam Michnik, awarded an honorary degree by the New School in 1984, launched his 1986 book, Letters from Prison, with remarks from the New School's then president, Jonathan Fanton, and the New Yorker's Lawrence Wechsler. Michnik, in that work, writes at the heart of what I see as PEN's mission. Start doing the things you think should be done, and start being what you think society should become. Do you believe in free speech? Then speak freely. Do you love the truth? Then tell it. Do you believe in an open society? Then act in the open. Do you believe in a decent and humane society? Then behave decently and humanely. It's my distinct pleasure tonight to introduce Ayad Akhtar, Pulitzer Prize-winning author of Homeland Elegies and president of PEN America. He'll introduce our panel tonight. Ottessa Moshfegh will be talking to three very different novelists, Rachel Kushner, Jin Lee, and Akhil Sharma, about the landscape of culture and social politics, how they want their readers to read, and what responsibilities they feel to the moral discourse of the day. Ayad has been a guest of the MFA program before, and it's a lasting gift to hear him speak, almost on any subject. Once or twice in my life, I've made the terrible mistake of not doing exactly what he said, and I warned everyone here against any course of action which does not carefully heed his insights. Ayad has touched and been a friend to so many of us in life and as an author that it's fitting he presides over an organization that has meant so much to writers everywhere. I wonder how many people here feel they have benefited from PEN America. Can I see hands? I know I have. Thank you to our panelists and everyone here.
It was a very alarming introduction. Not that you need my approval, but you have it. It's really an honor and a pleasure to officially open the 18th Annual World Voices Festival. The festival was started in 2005 by Salman Rushdie, Michael Roberts, and Esther Allen in a time of turmoil in America. Salman and his colleagues wanted to encourage America to face the world at large rather than to retreat in the wake of 9/11. The idea was to celebrate literature and writers from around the world and sow the seeds of international dialogue. We are, of course, once again facing a moment of division and turmoil at home and abroad. This week we'll turn to writers to help us imagine the world, futures, ways through it, across 40 events in New York and Los Angeles. Just a word on PEN America before we get started. We're an organization whose mission is to support writers and to support writing and those who love it, reading. We have members in every U.S. state, chapter cities across the country, from Detroit to Tulsa, from Birmingham to Miami. You can check your program for information on how to join. We'd love to have you if you're not already a member. I want to thank our presenting partners at the New School and the Creative Writing Program at the Schools of Public Engagement, and our partners at the Strand Bookstore for making our authors' work available. And I also want to thank our interpreters from Pro Bono ASL for helping us make this night accessible to a wider range of audience members. Tonight, our 2023 guest chair, the inimitable Ottessa Moshfegh, has put together a truly remarkable lineup. She's assembled some of our brightest writing stars and asked them to think on the question, why write? Ottessa Moshfegh is a fiction writer and screenwriter. Her novel, Eileen, was shortlisted for the National Book Critics Circle Award and the Man Booker Prize and won the PEN Hemingway Award for debut fiction. Jin Lee is the author of Free Food for Millionaires and Pachinko, which was a finalist for the National Book Award. She has received fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation and the Radcliffe Institute of Advanced Study at Harvard. Min serves as a trustee at PEN America and is a colleague of mine there. Rachel Kushner is the author of the novels The Mars Room, The Flamethrowers, and Telex from Cuba, and the essay collection The Hard Crowd. She has been a finalist for the Booker Prize, the National Book Award, and the National Book Critics Circle Award. Akhil Sharma is the author of the novels Family Life and An Obedient Father. His stories have appeared in The New Yorker, The Atlantic, the Paris Review. He has won a Guggenheim Folio Prize and the International Dublin Literary Award, a real group of slouchers. Please give a warm welcome to Ottessa, Min, Rachel, and Akhil.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. This panel is kind of astounding for me. I've been looking forward to this conversation for months, and I'm so grateful to these incredible writers for joining me here. And I've gathered you here really for totally selfish reasons, and it's just because I want to hear you talk about why you write, how you write, and I think maybe we all do. But okay, so I wrote a little tiny thing that I'll just embarrass myself and get it out of the way. And it's this confession. I also want to hear you talk to me specifically, okay? I am hopeful that what you say, the very words you use in the next hour, will resonate in me and illuminate something in my mind that I have been too afraid or too stupid to see clearly before you. I have read your books and experienced this phenomenon already. And I think it's why I love to read novels, right? To experience my mind and my heart in a new way and to know myself better. But that's putting a lot of responsibility on the words, right? And I just wanted to open up in this really general way with, how do you feel about that responsibility? Rachel?
The responsibility to have an effect on a peer as a reader?
Or any reader.
Yeah. You know, it's actually, I think it is a wonderful question, partly because it's one I don't think about a whole lot, the responsibility to the reader. Maybe in part because when I'm writing, I am definitely writing towards something, but it isn't a reader per se. It is a higher expectation above me that knows me and is waiting for me to produce something that is better than the sum of myself that I could produce on any given day. Like a novel takes so long to write, and you have so much time to go through all these different iterations of what you think you can do and watching it change over the course of that time. And so the organic expectations of the project itself maybe stand in for something like what a reader might be in terms of what you want to do. But I never think of a person reading a book who's someday going to have my book in their hands. It's much more a private dialogue with myself. Maybe for someone who's more religious, it would be something like that person's God, but it's something in me or above me that is drawing me to be a better version of myself, but is not the reader.
Akhil?
When I was writing Family Life, which draws on my own life, I asked my parents' permission. And my mother said, just make me look good. And my father said, Akhil, if you want to keep a secret, put it in a book. And I sort of feel like when I write, I don't think of any ordinary reader, but I think about the writers who made me want to write. And I write with the idea that they might read it and think this is not bad.
Fair enough.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Otessa for curating us, because this is the lunch table I wanted to be part of as a young person. So it's such an honor, because these are writers that I admire so much. And I thought that, I actually asked my husband, do you think it's overkill if I bring their books for them to sign? And he said, it's not cool. So I tried to be cool today, so I didn't bring it, but I will next time. But also, golly, I guess I have to be a bit contrary here, because I do feel deeply responsible. And people write to me if I get anything wrong. And because I have a very often a political question that becomes the reason why I stay with my fucking books for so long, I do feel this very strong sense of responsibility to my readers, to the record. I do. And it's not a diary for me. And I couldn't imagine sharing my diary. Like, I remember, I don't know if you guys have read Virginia Woolf's diaries, because I have. And when you read them, you realize that she's such a bitch. like she's so gossipy and petty and jealous. And at the same time, like, you read A Room of One's Own, or you read On Illness, or you read To the Lighthouse, and you're going, what a magnificent, luminous mind, right?
But don't you think she could be writing that for the record in a more abstract way than thinking of specific readers from her own time?
Completely.
Novel?
No, completely. And also, I feel like you have the right to be a bitch in a diary. Like, you have the right to be petty and angry and to have emotions that you're not proud of. But I think when I'm working on a novel, I'm constantly thinking, no one's going to read it. I just tell myself, no one's going to read it. Nobody cares. And it was really fortunate, because my first 2 manuscripts, I didn't have a contract, and I didn't have an agent. So I wrote both books on spec, which is bananas. Don't do that. And I think that in a way, it was helpful, and I think I am very good at tricking myself into thinking, nobody cares, so just keep going, but it has to be fucking great. Mm-hmm. It does. I do really feel that way, and I'm sorry I'm cursing. I do that when I'm nervous.
Okay, well, to punish you for cursing, I'm going to come back at you with a question. Because I'm curious. Your background didn't start off in creative writing, right? I mean, this is, you were a lawyer. And when I met you, I distinctly, before I read you, I had a very distinct impression that this writer really has her shit together in, like, the polish and poise. And I found that in your novels as well, that there's like this very poised and polished presentation of story. And
thank you.
Thank
It doesn't
you.
feel like punishment at all.
But I also wondered, is she also tortured? Is she writing from that, really uncomfortable place of needing to create? Or are you just kind of like, cool?
No, cool I am not. No, I'm not. And I would like to be cool. Like, whenever I meet people who say things like, I don't want to be cool, I just think, you're lying. Like, no, I really want to be cool. I want to be pretty. Like, no, I do. Like, I don't know. When I meet women who say, I don't care about my looks, I'm just thinking, really? Good for you. But, like, I would like to be attractive and smart. I would like to be respected. I want those things. And I keep thinking, if I say that, maybe it'll happen. And in the same way, I would very much like those things because inside I don't feel them. And I do think that writers feel a sense of internal impoverishment, our chaos, our neediness. I think it's there.
Mm-hmm. Is it there for you, Akhil?
He's cool.
You know, I write because I'm mentally ill, right? That's why I write. You know, I just like to say that for me, the diaries, Virginia Woolf's diaries, are greater than the novels, right? Like I read Mrs. Dalloway and I say, okay, this is good, you know, because when you're reading a writer, you're reading the writer against everybody who's ever written, right? So you're reading Mrs. Dalloway, and you know, there's Ulysses, right? Which is right next to it. You're reading, like, it doesn't, to me, a lot of her, I think the diaries are so, like, I love mayhem, like just emotional mayhem. I love her anti-Semitism towards her husband. I just love that. Like, that's insane behavior.
How Akhil got canceled. We were here. He means well. He means well. Please don't tweet that.
You're cool, Akhil.
But Otessa, you have
yeah.
to answer the question.
What question?
The responsibility.
Oh, yeah, I feel a responsibility to deliver an interesting experience. And that's about as far as I get, because I think that if I tried to be responsible for someone else's feelings, I would fail miserably. Like, I would not understand. Like, I could not predict how people would feel or what people would think. But I can kind of take the reader by the hand and guide them through like a virtual reality inside their mind and have them really kind of writing their own book as they're reading my book. And I just expect them to do that. But in terms of responsibility, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I have more of a responsibility to be irresponsible as a writer, you know, to kind of take the risks that people didn't really want to take. So, you know, reaching out into the darkness to find where, you know, that wall is, and then seeing what's written on the wall, that kind of thing.
So is irresponsibility what makes it interesting for the reader?
No, I think there are two different things. I mean, I think what's interesting for a reader varies from reader to reader. So maybe I'm just trying to write what's interesting for me.
But haven't you written a story and published it knowing it's not very good, but you would like to get your money? Isn't that like,
What money?
I've done that.
No.
I wrote
Rachel is shaking her head violently.
I wrote a story, and I have these two readers, and who I always show, and one of them said, you know, this is not very good. And the other person said, you know, this is not very good, but it has a lot of sex in it. And so probably you could make it work. And so, you know, like, I made it work and I sold the thing. And I regularly tell myself, you know, you're not trying to write a good story. You're trying to write a story that if you squint your eyes, will sort of look like a story. Right? Because the idea of, if you begin to think about trying to write a good story, you're lost. You're captured by it, by these weird standards. And so what you're hoping for is that the structure will do a lot of the work for you. And if the structure does a lot of the work, even like you wear a pair of pants, right? It has 2 legs. Great. It's not the best fitting pair of pants, but it's a pair of pants. And I sort of feel like that's what it means to be a working writer. Like I need to, I got to pay my mortgage. I got to do all these different things.
Except we don't have to wear pants that are shaped like pants or that are called pants in terms of the form we choose to write in, right? Like I was thinking when you said that the story is a good story, then the word good for me became detached from what I was still trying to answer Otessa's question about responsibility, like what are the standards of excellence in my own mind and where do they come from? But for me, a good story would be, if I hear a story, there's an anecdote, I think I have the rights to use it, or I think of it myself. If it has some complexity to it, that's like a latent content, where it's not just, oh, and then this thing happened, which is not enough to build a story around for me. There has to be some secondary thing where the character also has a parallel trauma or drama or some curiosity to the story that gives it this shape where it's almost like a ready-made. And I think I'm the person to tell this story. Then good becomes like bespoke for me. Whereas when I was just learning how to write when I was young, you go to like fiction college and everybody's writing short stories and you're trying to figure out how to write stuff that looks like fiction. And we all have to start somewhere, but it's clueless flailing for a while because you're trying on other people's pants and they don't fit.
But surely you've written something, right? When you read your own work, you must think that certain passages are not as great as they could be, right? And still we, at a certain point we have to abandon them. We have to abandon, like a novel is
I love all my stuff.
Okay. Then, fair enough. That's not my experience.
Well, I'm curious, Akhil, because, maybe many of you in the audience know this, but you published a novel called An Obedient Father, and then, 20 years later, you went and revised it. Why did you do that?
I rewrote it. I rewrote it because I had separated from my wife and I was so anxious that I couldn't do any work. And so this was something that I could go and fiddle with. And it was a novel that I had never been happy with. I had published it because at a certain point I was just so sick of it that I wanted to get rid of it. And so I published it. And then I went back to it and I thought I could make it better. It was and I felt some loyalty to the subject matter and some loyalty to the characters. But certainly if I could have, I got paid $0 for it, not a cent. And so certainly if I could have done something else, I would have done that.
You would have done that other thing.
I would have done the other thing.
I see. I'm going to, okay.
By the way, I wish you could see your face right now.
You all are lucky that you can, I guess. I wanted to read some from A Family Life, which to me is kind of a book about becoming a writer. I know that's not really what it is, but that's how I chose to read it. And the protagonist, the narrator, says he goes to the library, I think, and discovers Hemingway. Is that right? In the library? Yes. Okay. And then he begins to read some essays about Hemingway. One essay said that Hemingway got away with writing plainly because he wrote about exotic things. If he were to write about ordinary things in an ordinary way, he would be boring. This remark was inserted in the middle of a paragraph. Reading it, I was shocked that something so important could be hidden like this. As long as I wrote about exotic things, I thought, I could then be a not very good writer and still be successful.
It's true. Like anthropology will carry a book a long way.
Say more about that.
So if you're reading a book about a very interesting subject, the subject will carry you a long way, right? It's the same way that if you have characters who are very interesting, the characters will carry you a long way. What a novel itself is characters, the pacing, the shapeliness of the scenes, the quality of the sentences, the quality of the words. You can lose a lot of different things and have the work still be effective, right? There are many books that are deeply flawed, deeply flawed, which are wonderful. So for example, like War and Peace, right? Like the last 100 pages of it. Who cares about Tolstoy's thinking about whether or not women should wear lipstick after they've been pregnant, right? Nobody cares. And yet it's an extraordinary work. And there are many works which are very moving, which are very effective, despite being in many ways terrible,
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm being contrarian here. I don't mean to be a jerk. So.
No, you're not being a jerk. Not at all. Actually, I don't know if I agree with that, but I definitely think that, and I say this because so many of my friends write academic scholarship of fascinating subjects, and they're never read. So I guess I have to disagree that just because something is exotic, that you could be a poor writer and that it'll be interesting. If anything, I can't think of a harder time in the world when it is to have your attention. It is so difficult to get your attention to read a book. I can read a book and say, I love this so much. Could you please sit down and read it? And you will look at me and say, Dear Minjin, I will get to it. I mean, I do what I just finished. The reason I'm so upset about this is because I just finished editing Best American Short Stories, and I just handed in my introduction. And a friend of mine said, literally, kind of like what you were saying about, well, it just, you don't get paid enough to write this thing. Because after you finish reading 120 stories and you select 20, you have to write an introduction. And generally, the form is, you say, you should look at these stories. And I like Best American Short Stories. And you cough up this stupid essay. And I just couldn't do it. And I thought, you know what? In 105 years, only 3 Asian Americans have been asked to be the guest editor. And I was pissed. And then I thought, okay, well, and then I thought about just how difficult it is to be a fiction writer today. It is really hard. I have 5 jobs, people. I don't even know how many jobs we all have here among the 4 of us. And then I thought about how hard people who edit literary magazines. I serve as a director on the Authors Guild, and I want to take a moment just to say that half the book writers in America live below the poverty line. So when we talk about money, when we talk about attention, it's because we think we're doing something that's terribly important. And maybe everybody in this room cares, but I don't know if everybody else does. So I keep thinking, how do we get people really engaged? And then also, how do we separate the good books from the books that perhaps it's not really worth the attention? Because maybe we lose readers because someone opens a book and says, oh, I don't want to finish that, therefore all books are bad. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I do think that we're becoming more shallow readers. People are reading, obviously, on their phones, and that's fine, so do I. But I really want to figure out how we can engage and light a fire to save fiction, because the people who are out there in the trenches reading slush piles, they are having a hard time.
Rachel.
Tess.
I'm curious, do you ever find yourself applying outside artistic limits that are not your own, that come from some outside source based in social convention and changing values? Do you worry about that when you're writing?
It's a great question, and I started thinking about that hearing Min talk, which, I mean, a lot of interesting things you said, but it started to curve back at the end toward the question for me of, and I'm sorry to bring things down to such a general level, but the question for me is really rooted in how art gets made and what you think art is. And does art serve the people who have put out into the collective a demand for it? Or does art surprise people and teach them what it was they really wanted to encounter? And I think that it's the second. And that when somebody has a vision, whether or not that vision answers right then and there to their moment, happens to, is intended to do that, is deliberately designed to or not, whether it's an artist or a writer, I really think if you have a force of vision, you have to stick to it. And sometimes you can be ahead of your time in certain ways. I mean, about limitations, like, you know, some of us have been thinking about questions and issues of racial justice for a long, long time. And now they are starting to trickle in a heavier way than they have in the past, out of necessity to some degree, but also because people are sort of ready for them. But that doesn't mean that writers have always been waiting to deal with these subjects. And same thing maybe with questions of gender identity. So you can sometimes be ahead of your time. Maybe at other times you could be behind your time and writing things that don't quite reflect the progress or the changes or the mood of a society. So I guess, sorry, this is a long answer, but I'm sort of two minds about these things. Like, I think you have to follow your own lead and set your own artistic vision and be true to it. And maybe people, you know, will come around and recognize what you're doing. If what you're doing rubs people the wrong way, you know, and I'm talking specifically about like people who write things that then somebody else is offended by, and maybe that sets off a chain reaction. That's never happened to me, thank God. But in terms of that, without importing exterior limits, I think that I would ask myself, what parts of what I do could be adjusted to not really offend other people without changing the essential thrust of what I want to do, what my mission is. Like, what hill am I willing to die on? And also, if you don't incorporate external limits, be ready to fully defend your work and say, I believe in this work 100%. Like, I wouldn't publish something and then backtrack and apologize. I just don't see myself doing that.
Thoughts?
Well, Otessa, how do you feel about defending your work? Do you feel that your reader is on the same page as you are? Like when you meet your readers. I mean, we're very fortunate because we actually have readers and we get to meet them. And I always think it's such a privilege. It is a real privilege to have readers. Like when I read Your Rest and Relaxation, I remember thinking, oh my God, who is this person? Even though I knew it was fiction, I thought that the person behind this book was absolutely iconoclastic. So I think it's interesting to me that you said that you were okay with being irresponsible, that you're okay with being interesting, because I thought, I've never read anything like this, right? And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I also loved, I just loved the risks that you took, But I also thought, oh, this person doesn't care about offending people. And I thought that was really, I thought it was remarkable. I thought it was remarkable because it took so much courage to write that book. Did you feel that it took courage?
You know, I'm from Boston, and like we are.
That answers everything.
You know, like insults mean nothing. There's just affection, you know. So I don't really know if I've offended anyone. To me, it seems so crazy that you can offend someone by writing fiction, which we all agree is not true. I mean,
But they still tried to ban us.
What do you mean?
Ban books.
Oh, ban. I thought you said bang.
Well, that too.
It's like who?
That
Where?
too. I enjoyed saying that.
Yeah, no, I mean, part of why I wanted to put this panel together was that at the moment that Penn came to me and said, want to put together a panel, I was kind of like, yeah, I really wonder how other writers are feeling right now in this present moment where, social politics and social media, or the tides are shifting so quickly, and what was lauded 10 years ago can now be seen as something really derogatory, and how careful are we supposed to be or not? I mean, Akhil, do you think about this?
Do I think about it? I do, which is why I write a lot of things as fiction, right? As a way to avoid blame being directly pinned on me. I mean, I remember somebody sitting in a class where I had been invited to talk about my stories, and somebody saying about the story Cosmopolitan that the character seems kind of rapey.
Rapey?
Rapey. And I don't know, like that's, it isn't how I would think of it. And it's like, but I don't, I write, like I believe that human beings behave in these weird ways. Like this is why I love the Virginia Woolf Diaries. Like it feels that what we need to do is to tell the truth about people. Otherwise, it's not fair to them, right? Like, if some, to be loved is also to be known, right? Like I would like to be known, and I would like to know you. And that means knowing things about you and revealing things about myself that are unattractive. Like how much I hate to tip. Like these are sort of things that are important, right? They're essential. So I don't know, I just write these things, and I mean, I rarely meet my readers, nobody writes me, and it's a very good way to live.
Well, yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, do you feel, you might feel like you're living in obscurity, but your books are very important and they are read. Are you delusional about that? Like I consider you a very important writer.
It's very, very kind of you to say. And I don't view myself as a very important writer. Or let me put it this way. I don't think of myself as very important, but I like to think of myself as more important than all the writers I dislike. Right? Like this is sort of how I spend my time. This sort of pettiness is how my mind works.
I feel like this conversation could go so many ways right now, but I'm going to bring it back to my own selfish curiosity and ask you, is there does a writer have something indelible in his or her or their fingers? Is there something about the way that one person writes a sentence that is essentially different, even if the words are exactly the same? So my question is there a spirit that travels through you and into your writing that you feel is very distinct to yourself? Does it shift according to culture and history? Does it grow according to your personal life, your journey? Or does it stay fixed like a fingerprint?
You know, I teach writing, so to answer your question, I think we're talking about two different elements of fiction. We're talking about voice and style. And I think that it's fair to say that if you read a Rachel Kushner passage, it is a Rachel Kushner passage. I think no one else could write that, and I would defend that, and I would probably, I don't know if I have spent enough time to say, these are the reasons why, but I think that if we had to do the algorithm, look, I'm so sorry to bring that up. But if we had to do the chat GPT and say, could we have a Rachel Kushner passage, I'm sure they can probably do the meter and the rhyme or the syntax and the diction for why that's but it's not that. I think that's just what the computer would be able to generate based upon scraping the data. But I actually think it would be because Rachel Kushner is present behind those words. And I think that for me, having read so much, and that is something that I can be very boastful of, I have read so much that when I read and I like something, it's because no one else could have written that. And I tell my students, after this semester, I don't think I'm going to be able to teach you how to write a novel or a perfect short story, but if I can get you to write the thing that only you can write, then I have saved you an enormous amount of time.
Hear, hear. Rachel, do you feel like that touch or the spirit changes over time from book to book, or is it always you?
I love the question. I love the way you put it, as a touch of spirit, because I don't want to sound pompous, but I do think it's something like that there's a kind of, and the fingerprint is a wonderful image for it, that there's a kind of imprimatur that you carry with you that's yours, and it's not static like a trademark. It's a sensibility that is like a homing mechanism, I think. And probably in certain ways, my tone is the same from when I was very young and wanted to be a writer, in elementary school. But it's maybe, to answer that, like the sensibility is kind of like the substrate. It's the thing that is there with you all the time. But as you read, I mean, I think all of us are probably, life is so much responsibility to curate what comes in. And then you also are kind of letting in little gasps of chaos, the part that you can't curate at all. Like the encounters that you have with life are so essential. And I was thinking during the pandemic that part of our intelligence, if I could speak collectively for all of us, got a little bit blunted if you were so lucky as to not be an essential worker, if you were at home. I was mostly at home. If you weren't having those kind of chance interactions that you can't control, there's a part of the mind that's a little more fallow. So it's that combined with what you're choosing to read, combined with this much deeper mechanism that for me is definitely always there, but I think technically you can grow as a writer. And as you grow technically, you find that you can do more with the originary spirit. No? That's there?
I feel that way. I mean, I feel like in each book I'm getting closer and closer to, maybe something that's moving at the same pace as me and kind of always going to be out of reach, but that I love that homing mechanism. Like I'm just a little bit more attuned to that mechanism at each book.
Here's a question. Is it, and for all three of you, is part of the mechanism, if you guys are with us on this, finding new ways not to compromise? For me, that's a big one. Like trying, you set out to write a book and you want it to be like the most original thing ever written, right? And then through the book, there are little ways in which the wings get clipped here and there for the necessity and the beauty of the structure of the thing. But it's always about finding new ways not to clip, which I'm not talking about cutting words, but finding ways to make your thing work your way without ever introducing compromise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely.
Do
I'm curious with Pachinko if that was on your mind.
I just love this discussion so much because I think when it comes to my novels, I work for the baddest bitch in the room. Like, I work for me. So it's actually a term that a friend of mine uses for herself, and I always thought I could never use that term, but I did it today. So proud. I think that when it comes to my standards, they're so absurd. They're absurd to me, and I like it. I like it. I don't feel this way to anybody else. I really don't. Because when I see somebody make something, I'm just so full of wonder. And if that person has somehow made that novel exceptional in the categories of fiction that I understand as a critic, and then also it's entertaining and it's edifying, that's an A+. But for me, because of my political questions and because of my demands of responsibility and accuracy, and because Koreans will kill me if I get it wrong. You think I'm kidding? Yeah. I think this whole question of compromise is so important because I think I've given up so many things to write fiction that I will defend it till I die. Like, I feel so important about telling the truth, the emotional truth, as well as the truth of my interviews. So even in my first book, I did much more research for my first book than my second book. People can't understand that. But when I met Wall Street Koreans, they were a certain way. And I was like, I'm going to get this right. And at the time when it came out in 2007, people were like, how could you say this? It's not very nice. And I was like, it's true. It's true. You just don't like being seen. It's uncomfortable to be seen. But it's true. And now, and I don't know, like I'm literally pumping myself up here, but in 2023, so many Koreans from Wall Street have said, it's true. But back then when it came out, they said, this is uncomfortable. I don't like this section. Non-Koreans were like, fine. They didn't care. Yeah.
I remember talking to this guy who wrote a big bestseller, and obviously when you're talking to a writer, you're not going to tell them that they're terrible, right? And he asked me how far I had gotten before I stopped. I said I stopped when the cat came in and scratched at the secret door. And he genuinely believed, and it was actually even more absurd than that, the cat and the secret door. But he genuinely believed that he had written a great work of art, right? And he was saying that he rejected criticism, and that's fine, man. Like, my interest is not in knocking you down. My interest is in something else. But I don't think that we are the good writers will say the same things about their work that the bad writers will say, right? That writers that most of us read and think, my God, this makes no sense at all. Like, human beings don't behave this way at all. They do think that they are wonderful. They do think that they have offered up this profound insight and that they're following their spirit, right? And I sort of feel like we have to, I don't know, like it's hard for me to trust my own. I mean, I write based on all the books I've read, etc., and my own sense of what is human beings. but it's hard for me to convince myself that my vision of what I've written is actually what the work is, right? Like, I think I've written a good book, but in reality, it might be a terrible book, right? And the book comes out, and it's published, and it's praised. I mean, when you look at all the terrible books that have won Pulitzers, or right, like when you look at that, like that.
What are like one example? like truly terrible?
What are? Let me
Is
see.
your lawyer here? Is your lawyer?
What about, like, Nobel Prize winners are easier, right? To pick as terrible writers, right?
I mean,
Like,
if you won a Pulitzer Prize, would you be a terrible writer?
would I be it if I won I wouldn't be a good writer, right? Like, the prize doesn't mean much, right? There's some idea that, okay, maybe if you have a large group of people saying this. Actually, I have an idea as to what is a terrible book that won the Pulitzer, but I would be embarrassed to say it,
Okay.
right? Because the person is alive, and who wishes to make enemies?
Could I say something about that? It's interesting, I mean, that you went from, us sort of trying to find language for how it is that we maximize our own sensibility as an aesthetic driver towards some kind of personal quality. And it's interesting to me, Akhil, that then you came in with, but we can talk this way, and yet, the good and the bad writers both say these things. And your statement comes in with a certain kind of force where I almost felt curtailed, like, oh yeah, I might just be another bad writer going on about the spirit. That said, then another voice came in and said, this idea of wrangling down, summoning into the room an objective good and an objective bad, and an arbiter who could declare the difference between the two is a kind of fantasy. It's sort of like with an intimate relationship. There is no one objective view of truth. There are only different subjectivities. History can do a certain kind of work to weigh in on literature, and I like the kind of stonewashing of history and what it produces through the wash, and so I will put myself in dialogue with books that have already kind of made it through that process, and I'm interested in the way that other people have read them and what they've decided is good and what's been lost from that. But the idea that there's somebody out there who could finally tell who really the good writers are from the bad ones, and the bad ones have been kind of walking through the world with somebody else holding their train, telling them they're good, but it's been false all along, that doesn't really concern me, because I just have to work with what I have, and I'm a born writer. It's how I relate to the world. Whether or not anyone else thinks it's good is sort of a secondary problem.
So I remember going to a poetry reading where somebody was comparing Amazon's shipping boxes to the Holocaust, right? And I personally thought this was disgusting, right? I thought this was terrible. I am willing to accept the fact that there are people out there who think this is good, right? And I'm certain that the person who wrote it thinks it's good, right? So I'm more than willing to accept that, right? So I'm not saying that there aren't multiple views of everything, right? Like the guy who wrote this poem comparing the Holocaust to Amazon's shipping boxes thought it was good and was happy to present it to an audience. Right? So I believe that there are multiple views of everything.
I mean, I think a big part about being a writer and being a published writer is making yourself vulnerable to this very kind of discussion, I mean, sure, we can all have our opinions about something, but we're all sort of trading stories back and forth, whether it's for the good or for the bad. But, Min?
Well, I thought that behind your last question about the changes of time and the eternal nature of the fingerprint and the spirit, as well as social media and how we understand information. What we're really talking about is what makes a book last. Now, what makes a book last could be related to what makes a book good, right? It could be, especially if a book continues to be read. So I still stand that the most important English novel for me is Middlemarch. It has aged well. That said, most people will not read an 800-page book, and they find her to be too precious and to be irritating. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But I think that I also have to say that because I'm 54 years old, I had long stretches of time in which I didn't have the internet in my life. I really have no idea how a 16-year-old would say, I'm going to read everything by Sinclair Lewis, which is what I did. I was like, I'm just going to read all of his 6 books that are the most important books. I mean, he's written way more than 6 books. But 1, I was a weird kid, and 2, I didn't have the internet. And there were only like 6 channels or something on television, and they weren't that good. But I love this dichotomy of this idea of can we say something is good and everything is relative, because I guess I believe in good and evil.
Well, wait, I didn't say
No,
everything's
I'm not
relative.
saying that. I'm just saying, no, that's not what you said. It's what I'm saying. But this whole idea of, there's a part of me that really is tempted to say there's certain things that are true and false. And I wonder if my grandchildren, if I have any, will agree that what I thought was true ended up being false. And I think that we, as writers who document, we actually record our thoughts and imaginations and our world on paper, and we're willing to stand by it, mostly. And we are willing to say, let us be assessed in present time and possibly, for fortunate, 100 years from now. And what do you think of our work then? And I think I am aware of it just because I'm so interested in politics and history.
So I think that's a good note to rest on while all of you come to the mics that will magically appear in the aisle in just a moment with questions for all of us or any of us.
Hello. Oh my God, that's so exciting. I have a question for all of you. You were talking about the fingerprint and the sensibility, and I'm really curious, once you get to the end of, say, the first draft or what you're working on, and you take a breath, what is your process like for returning to that work and getting it to, even if it's not published, like for publishing, like what is your first reapproach to your own work like? What is that process like, and how does it feel? And thank you all for your work. I'm a fan, so thank you for doing this and for being here.
Thanks for the question. Does anyone want to jump in?
You just finished a draft of something.
I did. I just finished a book. It's going to be out in September 2024, a while from now. With the first draft of a book, well, I have this guy Jason read it. He's my husband, and he's trained in comparative literature, and he also knows me, and so he can kind of merge like what's possible in the novel with what I'm capable of, and he's a really special reader for me because he's not going to like line edit the thing and go, oh, well, this part was kind of, it's strained credulity. Like, one can figure all that stuff out after a while with enough distance. But he can say, like, the energy is here, and the energy is here, and it's here. And it's really helpful for me to have a reader like that for the first read. And then that begins this really exciting and also rigorous, pretty long process of like you have the basic structure of the thing and it has good bones, and then you're gonna at least for me, to go in and overhaul and add and think more deeply about things. So that's the basic process for me.
That's basically what I do as well, with her husband.
Yeah, it's basically just Jason. I mean, I would say, there's something wonderful about putting a draft away.
But Otessa, you don't
Yeah.
show your work to anyone, right?
No. Occasionally, I'll read aloud in this way that's like, can I show off? Can I show off what I wrote today? And then, inevitably, that passage will get cut.
You read that to Luke
Yeah.
or to Walter?
To all the dogs, really.
Okay.
All the dogs across the world. But I think it's an amazing thing to put a manuscript away and then pull it back out, because in the 6 weeks, a month, whatever, that you haven't been reading it, you've changed. Your mind has gone on and processed other stuff. Some holes have been filled, and you're a little bit smarter, and the detachment is healthy. 'Cause now you're not, or I can speak for myself, now I'm not so concerned with doing what I want, but rather doing what the book wants, because the book is out of me now, It's not really up to me anymore. I'm now writing in service of the book, and that's how I approach a revision.
I am so nice to myself when I write. So even though when I revise, I can be quite tough, when I'm drafting, whatever number draft I'm doing, I treat myself with great gentleness, great openness. I am very gracious to myself, and it's very helpful. And then after I finish reading it, after I finish a draft or draft 14, I always ask myself, what did you want to say? What did you want to say, and did you say it? And did you say it in this paragraph? I literally ask myself this question for every paragraph, every sentence. It has to be there. There's nothing excessive. So even though I write very long books, usually by the time my editor gets it, it's kind of done. I don't actually show it to anybody. I don't work that way. But I have this sort of shifting personality where I'm the drafter and I can do whatever I want. I can have as much chocolate as I like. And if I need to take a nap, I take a nap. I read fiction when I write. Some people have that thing where they never read other people's voices. I actually always feel the companion of other fiction writers. I'm on team fiction, so I fight for other fiction writers, and it's so hard what we do, I think, in my mind. So I encourage you to extend grace to yourself, because it's so difficult, and ask yourself what it is that you want to say. And then ask yourself, is it really truthful? Because I always ask my students, well, did you write it for, this is kind of ironic because I had said earlier that I would like to be considered positive things. But when I write fiction, I always ask myself, did I succeed in saying what I wanted to say? That's a very different thing than to say I want to have, lovely layers of cream and praise. That's a very different thing. I'm not asking for praise when I write. I'm asking you, did she say what she wanted to say? And then I think I succeeded as a writer. And I can definitely say that everything that I've ever published, I've said what I wanted to say. I don't take it back, and I will defend it. So that test is a very specific kind of test, and I think my legal training is very helpful in that sense. So people often say, oh, I went to law school, can I quit to be a writer? I'm like, well, if you have health insurance and a lot of money, it's useful. But if you don't, you can still do it. But apart from the practical realities, I do think that having that legal training, I'm a very logical thinker, but when I'm drafting, I let myself, be a very fanciful, imaginative person.
Thanks, everyone. From this side?
Hi. I have two questions, but I'll be less selfish and just say one. I guess this is kind of a personal question. I'm working a 9-to-5 job right now, and it's so different than what I would personally want to pursue, which is being an artist, being a filmmaker specifically. And for me, it kind of eats away at me when I work, just because I'm thinking so much about what I could be learning during that time and like improving my skills. But I don't really know what to do, because like obviously I need to be able to pay for my bills and health insurance and things like that. So I don't know if any of you guys have advice on just kind of like how to manage that time, or when to take that leap, or when to change things up, because it pains me to not be doing what I love and like learning it more.
Thanks for the question. Is it okay if I answer just personally? I feel you, and I've also been there. And the first thing that I did was I tried to take those 9-to-5 jobs that would somehow feed me on the side for my creativity, and that actually led to some really good creative growth and ideas. But ultimately, I needed to leave New York City. For real. I had to get out of here to first like get my footing on like what it means to have a day. And that really shifted the way that I approached my writing. In fact, that was the key. I love New York. I wish that I could live here, but for me, it's the pace, the incredible density of minds collected in space. The cost is not great for a young artist who wants that time. So, you know, take it or leave it. That's my answer.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would say something similar. But, I mean, if you're a filmmaker, maybe you want to be in New York because you want to be in dialogue and with people. But I think that the practical thing about doing jobs that fit with what you want to do, like I worked at literary magazines, and I learned a lot about other people's writing by editing their writing, and I learned to kind of be burnishing a standard that was higher than what I would have been capable of producing at that time in my life. And it was a kind of cultural education, like a sophistication machine to be in, and be in this dialogue where you're kind of like pretending that you know more than you do, because people are telling stories about some famous artist and they're using like his first name shortened to Bobby, and you're supposed to know who that is. And I've only spent so many years doing that, and then I left and did freelance writing in the art world because I didn't want to work a 9-to-5 job forever and wake up at 5 a.m. to do my own writing. But it's like, where can you get to the point where you can do that? I think having desire and going to events and scrabbling down ideas and stealing time where you can is really important.
Well, first of all, I think I'm a mother, and you look so young, so I'm worried about you. Forgive me if that sounded patronizing. That's not what I meant. It's that I really worry about my students who have this sort of imagined life of being an artist, and I always try to interrogate what that means to them, because so much of what I do as a fiction writer isn't all dreamy and wonderful. I have so much garbage that I have to do all the time. And I say that because all of my legal training and all of my forbearance is very useful. I'm a very professional person. I always will be. And I'm a very ethical person. And all those qualities are very helpful to be an artist, actually. Most artists are not drinking and fucking around and taking drugs. Every major writer that I know is very disciplined.
and gets his or her or their work done. So in terms of quitting your job, I'm the last, although I did quit my job, I did, and my husband and I had $15,000 saved, and I thought for sure that I could replace my income of $83,000 as a lawyer in a year, and of course, I had a face plant of 11 years. So I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Like, to be so publicly humiliated for such a long time and to be considered a loser by all your peers, I've had that experience, and now that I've eaten so much fucking humble pie that I can't take it anymore, I'm actually a different person. And thankfully, I've achieved some success. But some other people might think I'm not a success, and I don't even care anymore. That said, I don't know how old you are, but I always tell my students, if you can, do it for a year and see how it feels, what it's like. Because that fantasy of this, like, oh, this beautiful dream that I can't have, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and makes you hate your real life. So for a year, maybe you could do it.
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's a fantasy, but I think just kind of going back to saying, like, doing what, like, only you can do. Like, I think for me, I'm, like, trying to figure out, like, if this feels so authentic to me and it feels like something that, it just feels like me when I do it, like, would it be worth it to spend more time? But I definitely don't. Like, I agree with you. I think it will be a hard life, so I think that's why I haven't made any irrational decisions yet. I'm, like, trying to figure it out, but yeah.
Sometimes being irrational isn't actually irrational. It could also just be a leap of faith. Okay.
First of all, it's such a thrill that you guys are real. Thank you for that conversation. I have a question and a plea. The question is, especially because we're at PEN America and we're talking about human rights and literature, how do you draw the balance between delight of portraying world life as you see it and you want to portray it, and knowing that what you put out there can actually change minds? You can either reinforce stereotypes, or you can create a Bridgerton-like reality where people begin imagining the world that I think we want to see. So how do you make that balance? And then the plea is, I work in education, I work in international education, and those science guys, they have made the world look like everything is about STEM and making money. And we have lost beauty. People are debating and getting rid of literature majors in college. I mean, books are being banned in libraries, but we are not doing enough for beauty. We are not doing enough for art. And please, what can we do to make sure that children grow up and want to read? And the books still have to be there for them to read. And I'm worried that they're not going to be. Thank you.
Akhil, would you like to respond to this one?
To me, this question seems very similar to the one that Otessa began the discussion with, which is our sense of responsibility. At least for me, the way that I write is, I write from my neuroses and from my problems, right? And, I hope not to do things that are hurtful or untruthful, but largely to ask me to help the world is like asking some truly wacky guy on the subway to be helping the world. And that's sort of how I I write because I have issues and I'm trying to grapple with them, right? That's how I see it. I'm on the board of a charity called City of Asylum, which provides stipends and housing for writers being physically persecuted by their governments for their writing. And there are all sorts of things that I do philanthropically which are not connected to my writing. They're just not connected to my writing. My writing is coming out of some bit of madness.
Everyone, we have run out of time, like way over. So I hate to say this, but we have to end this conversation. I just want to thank Rachel Kushner, Jin Lee, and Akhil Sharma so much.
And Otessa.
And thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Otessa.
Thank you, Otessa.
Otessa.